Hello, my dear friends. Mike Amori, WCA. Yeah, this is the week 3 update for the 12 o'clock, 2 o'clock students. And I want to show you a couple of opening traps that took place this weekend. The one you're about to see took place at the Pearl School in Yonkers. And one of our 2 o'clock students got caught with black. So first, let me explain to you what white is trying to do here. Normally, after e4, e5, you will see moves like knight f3, correct? That's the most common move you see in this position. But as you improve, you're going to start to see players experiment a little with white. So after e4, e5, you may see the move d4, and it's more than playable. My recommendation to you is to take the pawn. Now, as far as the opening is concerned, try to remember the 3 main principles that we follow. You know, we're trying to control the center at all times, but we kind of throw in using the center pawns as one, developing all the minor pieces, and king safety. Those are the big 3 that we're studying. So if you see an opening that you don't understand, try to follow those principles. However, every now and then you'll run into something where your opponent is giving you material. Now, whether or not to take it really depends on how much of the opening you know. If you're being coached or somebody showed you something fancy, then by all means play your preparation. But let's say you're seeing this for the first time. There's nothing wrong with taking the pawn. I highly recommend that you just take the pawn on d4. And white has 2 different ways to play from here. They can continue offering you pawns, and this is something called the Danish Gambit. Let me show that to you now, where they had so much fun giving one away that they offer you a second. If you'd like, you can take the pawn, and then if they're really feeling generous, they'll play bishop to c4, and it looks like they're giving you a 3rd pawn. And they are. But this one they're going to take back because they don't want you taking their rook up in the corner, putting a queen on the board. That would really hurt. So this time they take. And if you put this position on a computer, you would think it would say that black is +2. But black is not +2. The position, most computers these days give this this position about half a pawn for black, and you're wondering, how can you be up half a pawn? Well, white has a lot of compensation. Try to remember what that means. White gets a lot of play in return for those pawns. They have 2 bishops pointing right at your king. There are 2 moves in this position that are played a lot. One being you can just check the king here, bishop to b4 check. And there is the other, which is d5, which gives a pawn back in order to activate the bishop down here on c8 and to kind of take some of the pressure off your position. White takes, and black can continue with knight f6. In this position, the move bishop takes f7 is all theory. So don't freak out if you see this. If you can memorize this, then by all means play it in one of your tournament games. When I say don't freak out, because it appears that if the king here takes the bishop, and they should, you're going to lose your queen down here on d8. But you're not. You take the bishop, they take the queen, and you can pause your video if you need to. How does black get their piece back, or their queen actually? Well, you play this really cool bishop b4 check, and now that's a discovered attack here against Big Mama. So her best move is to just, she's going to get captured anyway, so you might as well block the check, and then bishop takes queen, and then knight takes. And that would be enough for you to get through all the way up into championship this position. Now, if you play the Danish Gambit on a regular basis, then obviously you're going to have more experience in this position than your opponents will. But honestly, if you're 1100, 1000, 900, and you're playing somebody with a similar rating, you have plenty of chances here with the black pieces. This is in equal position. You have some cool differences. You know, if you look over here, I'll put some highlights on for you. That's actually a frog that just spray paints. It kind of just like spray paints for me this green, and he does a wonderful job. So you have 3 against 1 on this side of the board, and it's 3 on 2 on this side of the board. And white has an extra pawn in the middle. So I guess you could say it's 4 on 2 here against 3 on 1. You get these really cool imbalances, and plus the bishops are of opposite color. So this would be a really good fight. You'd have a great time playing this position. So let's run it back. You take the pawn. They offer you another. You take it. They offer you another. You take it. They take back, and now the move d5. Okay? So that's one way to handle the Danish Gambit. Let me show you another. Here is a nice trick in the opening that whenever you have a situation like this, so this is when we just took the first pawn, and now they offer you the second. If you do enough studying in chess and you start to see positions where your opponent has a pawn where a knight usually is, sometimes that's an indication or a sign that you can bring your queen out without her getting chased all over the place. So in order to do that, I'll show you the second way that they play against the Danish Gambit is this very nice move d5. So in a lot of these black openings, you will see the move d5 as sort of like a safety move for black. It just strikes back in the center, almost always opens up a bishop on c8, and it can be a very effective tool. So I'll just show you how this line might look. White will take in the center, and you get to take back with your queen because there's no way for white to really bother you. If they push past you, then you're going to have a passed pawn over here, and black, this is annoying because, you know, if this pawn moves, then the knight can't come to c3. So black would be okay there. So they normally take, and now they have an isolated d-pawn. See that highlight? There are no white pawns on either side. So white is going to get a lot of play because they have open lines, but black is going to have a nice chance to attack that pawn. You know, how about knight c6? Why not? Knight f3 protecting, bishop g4 pinning, bishop e2, and there's that bishop b4, that free check again. Here, I'm going to stop because I could start showing you some more opening theory, but the purpose of this video was to get you through the opening without losing something terrible, like what happened to our student earlier. So I'll give you a review here. This is after us taking the pawn, the first pawn. White offers the second, and instead of taking this time, we play that little tricky move d5. They swap it, we take back, they take the pawn, we just start piling up on the pawn. They'll protect it, we attack the defender, they protect the defender, we give a check, and we continue to play chess with active pieces, even material. Okay? Now let me show you what happened to our hero, who was not familiar with this move d4, and he made a mistake. He played the move f6 here, which is not a good idea. If you play f6 in this position, you have to be willing to play a pawn down, because when white takes, and they should take, you absolutely cannot take back with the pawn. This is what happened. This is a very, very common mistake in the reserve, and well, by the time you get to championship, this gets cleaned up, but I do hope you're paying attention. Queen h5 check. Ouch. Game is basically over. Moving the king to e7, the queen takes here. King f7, bishop c4 check, and you're getting crunched. You guys see that? Yeah, it's really, really bad news. I don't even want you to have nightmares, so I'm going to stop here. So be very careful with that pawn move f6. Now let me show you where else this pawn move pops up. You guys all know e4, e5 very, very well. So when white plays knight f3, you don't see too many masters protecting this pawn with f6 for the same reason. If you play f6, you have to be willing to play this position a pawn down because white's going to take that pawn. And you have to know some theory here. I mean, this is not really good for black, but you have to know to attack the knight with your queen or do something else. You cannot take the knight. If you take the knight, you have a losing position because of queen h5 check. And your best move, believe it or not, is to give away the rook in the corner. Do you guys see how? You have to block that check. And then if you do, the queen will take the pawn and then take the rook. And that's probably the best that you have. If you move your king, the queen is going to take on e5, king f7, and then they hit you with bishop to c4. And now you get to play that really cool move d5 again, except this time it's too late because they'll just take it and your position stinks. Now, why do you have to play d5? Let's back up. If you move your king, you have to go to g6, correct? If you go to g6, now they play queen f5 and force you on this diagonal, and that is not pretty. You're also going to have to block with this pawn, and eventually the h-pawn is going to come, and the rook is going to get into the game. Trust me, my friends. After knight f3, play d6, knight here, play some opening you know. Do not play pawn f6. Now, if you think that move is just limited to these scholastic openings, oh no. This stuff pops up all the time. Let me show you another really quick. Okay, isn't it amazing how fast I can set up the pieces? So here is this could be a position from the Perk defense or some, you guys don't really need to know the names right now. It's some opening, right? If white, you see this battery up here of queen and bishop? This is very useful sometimes to attack the fianchettoed king by offering a swap of bishops. But if you play bishop h6 right now, black can win a pawn. And not only win a pawn, but really get a very, very comfortable position for the rest of the game. And it's all because of this f-pawn moving with the king still on this diagonal. Can you guys figure out what white missed here? You can pause the video. Very good. Knight takes e4. Giving away the knight, but not really. The queen is attacked. So if you move the queen, I can still play my little trick that you're about to see. So white at this point figures, I might as well take the knight. So what? Why'd you give me a free knight? Well, you're going to get the piece back with, queen h4 check. Do you see? It's the same exact pattern. The f-pawn weakens the diagonal, and that opens the way for a tactic. You guys see that? Pretty cool. Over here, knight f3, f6. This is a sacrifice, knight takes pawn, but it's just a tactic to open the diagonal for the queen, h5. Okay? In the position that I just showed you a second ago, after bishop takes e4, you play queen h4 check. If they block the check, you just take the bishop with the queen. And here, black wouldn't mind at all to swap queens, because if you look at this position, black is not only up a pawn, they have two bishops, and they have this monster. This is like a beast, this dark squared bishop, especially since white doesn't have one. I would love to play this position as black. Even I would probably do well with this one. Okay, you guys see that? Let me show you one more thing, and then we're going to call it a day. Okay, look what's on the board. This is the King's Gambit on move 2. Move 2, white decides to throw the f-pawn up the board. There is a check right now with this queen, but it can be blocked with a pawn on g3, so it doesn't quite have the same effect. If you see this for the first time, I've recommended to students who are seeing the King's Gambit to decline it, not to accept, and play the move bishop to c5. And a lot of things. There's so much you can do. But after knight f3, what'll happen a lot is you just play d6 and bring your knights out in some order, castle your king, and play chess. Again, this is for reserve section, championship, and down. This is enough to get you through the opening, and then if you play it in a real tournament game, you can do some more work at home. However, why the King's Gambit? Because if you play bishop to c5 in this position, are you giving white a chance to make the same mistake by playing f takes e5? If that happens, now black has a winning position because of the same check. But there's a huge difference now. The queen can slide across. There's no f-pawn here. You see that? And take the e-pawn. So if you move your king, probably not a good idea. I think queen takes pawn is pretty strong. I know I'm being sarcastic. That's checkmate. Ouch. So they're going to probably block this check with their g-pawn, and then the same trick we saw in the other positions. Queen takes e4, check. Even if the queen blocks, you just pick up the rook in the corner. This is not going to be a good day for white. Okay, I hope you learned something about how to play these tricky openings at the beginning. As you progress and you start to move to higher levels, I'll make sure that you guys know where to look to improve your opening play. Okay, so this is a good way to not just get through the opening, but also pick up some tactics too. Okay, my friends, I will see you next week.